Hello, welcome back. I am Anthony Mueller, the Wine Advocate reviewer for Washington State and South Africa for the Wine Advocate. Of course, we have a very, very amazing guest, and for all of August, I'm going to focus for the attention for the great up-and-coming producers of the regions. So I have Mr. Alex Milner of Natte. So you can get him to join. Hope everyone's having a fantastic Wednesday. And we are connected. Hello.
Hey man, how you doing?
How are you doing?
Good.
Awesome. Good to have you. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. I know it's late there. For our viewers and some of our readers in the States, can you please go ahead and give us a quick background and a brief bio about yourself, about the property as well?
Yeah, well, basically my grandfather bought the property in 1969 as a very old and rundown wine farm, and he was to basically his passion was horses, and he was going to breed thoroughbreds, which he did here very successfully with my father for just over 30 years. And then I studied winemaking at Stellenbosch. I wanted a change of scenery. I didn't trust the brakes on horses. And I studied winemaking. It was a strange time in the wine industry because of what the 90s had brought to the table, to the wine world.
Sure. Yeah.
And basically, yeah, so I graduated there in 2004. And always had this dream of turning Natte around and into what it once was. And so in a very honorable way, the horses were led out and the barrels were rolled in again.
Awesome. And you're also a cyclist, an avid cyclist, yes?
Yeah. So I raced at a sort of a pro-am level. Actually, funny enough, my first D-Stalker was bought on prize money that I won.
Really?
In a big race around here. So it kick-started my winemaking career as well.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
So again, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to focus pretty much all of the chats that I have for all of August focused with producers that are the up-and-comers for my regions. And I have to say, hands down, my last trip for my report to South Africa, I was really, really taken back with Cinsault as a whole, as a entire category. And you are doing Cinsault really, really well. Within your range, you've got quite a few numbers of bottlings of Cinsault. Can you kind of briefly talk about what your intention was when planting and or dealing with Cinsault and making Cinsault?
Well, I think one needs to start off by saying when I was at Stellenbosch University, we had a very old-time professor who was a viticultural professor, and he very, without even being shy about it, he said to us when we came into sort of studying the various cultivars, when we came to Cinsault, he says, look, don't worry about studying about this because it has no more economic value to South Africa.
Interesting.
It did have it, but unfortunately, it's out. And
Yeah.
I suppose that's always stuck in my head. And I was fortunate to do a harvest in the south of France at Domaine de Trienne. And they were making a lot of Cinsault. We made some into red, obviously a lot of Provençal rosé, which is delicious. And I remember my father sending me a mail and saying, hey, how's it going? And I said, funny enough, we're having to hand pick Cinsault, which is sort of quite amusing for me because obviously it was considered like a bad hangover in South Africa. It was something that at a time we needed to sort of move on from. And I think sort of fast forward a couple of years, I came back to South Africa and very much with this idea of making wine of the 90s and you know, and all those styles that went with it. I, I reached a sort of crossroads in my winemaking career where it was, you know, making more of a Cab Merlot blend or a Shiraz or whatever it was just, I didn't have the resources to really fight that sort of fight. And I remember it was in my 2011 harvest, and I was picking Merlot of all things, and the block opposite to it was Cinsault, and chatting to the farmer, and I think he probably could see I was a little bit negative about everything at the time. And I said to him, shit, is this Cinsault? I'd love to get a bit. He says, you know what? Bring your pickup tomorrow. Sorry, in South Africa we call it a bucky, but bring your truck and we'll load you up with some. You can have it. My gift to you.
Nice.
And I was like, awesome. And anyway, so yes, the 90s do rock. I learned all my music career there, so don't worry. But the wine, you know, had a little bit to stir. But so basically made it into wine, and to be honest, it was the best wine I'd made in the cellar that year. And it was suddenly this whole Cinsault thing sort of thing. It's like, wow, I've got the opportunity now to pick the very best blocks that I can get.
For sure.
And no one wants them. And it was really a sort of a perfect storm to sort of, you know, route to market was really straightforward, you know, and since then, obviously, I mean, if I looked into a crystal ball, I would never know it would happen like this. But I backed the right horse, you know, as my grandfather would probably have said.
So we do have some Cinsault to enjoy and taste. So I've got
match you on that one.
Perfect. I tell you what though, how does your foil look? Your top look? Is it that pretty?
How does?
How is your top look? Is it that pretty?
Well, Anthony, I've got to teach you something. You don't cut it; you just pull it.
Oh, of course. But you got to present.
Of course, you know, you just did an extra step right there.
Oh, it's this guy right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
You got to love wax, you know, especially when it cuts so perfectly on the top.
Just go right through.
I know people are going to like comment and say, "Oh, we hate wax. But you know what? Really?
No, it's so much better for the bottle.
Time.
So much better for the bottle as well. So it keeps the provenance of the wine that much more intact. So
yeah,
good on you for having wax tops. So before we get into tasting the wine, let's talk about the different Cinsauts that you have in the range. You've got 4 currently, correct?
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. So take us through.
So basically, I mean, so once I got this sort of attraction to Cinsault, and I realized it was actually a very interesting wine, and you know, it was something that I could see potentially enjoying making and being able to make a very good one. I made a massive effort to try and find interesting blocks, and that was a simple. I mean, I was young. I took my bicycle and I literally cycled around trying to find these damn things, because a bicycle, you're traveling slower, and I could quickly identify a leaf and figure it out, and generally on a mountain bike. And what I would do, I would drop a pin to my wife's phone on WhatsApp, and then after the ride, figure out on Google Earth exactly where it was, and so that's how it worked. And with many cultivars in South Africa, you often have this scenario where they will say, "Oh, a good Cabernet comes from Stellenbosch," or a good Sauvignon Blanc comes from, you know, Durbanville Hills, whatever the situation may be. No one could say that about Cinsault. It was very much a thing was, you know, it's always good to have in the cellar because it's a great blending partner, and actually, you know, lifts wine and bulks wine up, whatever the case may be.
True.
And so I thought, well, shit, I'm going to have to sort of create my own project to try and figure out where quality lies. And this was in 2014, and we harvested from 6 different vineyards to ascertain where did good Cinsault come from in South Africa. And the sort of conclusion from that exercise was they're all damn good. They're just all very different.
Sure.
And that's when we started sort of focusing on 4 particular vineyards to try and sort of figure out, you know, for the viniophile, they're fascinating because they taste particularly different, although they're made in very similar styles. And, you know, I think that's what's really exciting about Cinsault, is it has an ability to express where it grows a lot better than any other cultivar in this country. You know, people may say, you know, I'm too passionate about Cinsault, but I really do believe that and I think going forward, I'd love to see winemakers really embrace this sort of ability that Cinsault has to really express where it grows.
For sure. I mean, Cinsault has a unique history to South Africa, being the patriarch of Pinotage, where, you know, Pinotage you know, has been around for about 100 years in South Africa. But ultimately, the reason why Cinsault was chosen ultimately was for its heat resistance. And as global warming continues, and, you know, the heat waves that continue on with the droughts for South Africa, Cinsault makes a lot of sense. I think it's gotten a bad rap for quite a long time. If you talk to the you know, the people who were making Stellenbosch Cabernet in the 70s, you know, you'll talk to them and you'll realize that there was a large number of Cinsault plantings, and a lot of Cinsault was blended into Stellenbosch Cabernet through the 70s. I made note of this with my report last year, talking to the Lariche father-son team, where they said they didn't really necessarily think it was doing anything to the blend, but after they went back to those wines 10, 15 years later, they saw that it added certain longevity. In its youth, it's very floral. For people who like Pinot Noir, Grenache, Gamay, those styles of wine certainly fit into what the wheelhouse and the toolkit of what Cinsault can do. So I think you've chosen wisely, putting you know, hanging your hat on the Cinsault variety. And you're right, they do take on a certain sense of terroir, and you can clearly taste that through the different bottlings that you have. We have today the 2017 Coastal, so I'm assuming that's kind of a declassified blend of the different plots that you make from the single area bottlings.
Yeah, so basically, the one we're going to quickly taste, the Coastal, is a blend of the 17 is a blend of 4 vineyards. This is our biggest bottling on the property, and basically, being the biggest bottling, it needs to be a wine that speaks to a greater audience. So stylistically, how we're trying to make it is we focus more on the Swartland and Siemensberg Paarl fruit. So basically 70% of this wine is made up of equal percentages. Actually, it's more than that. It's close to 80% of this wine is made up of even split between Swartland and Siemensberg Paarl. And then the difference is a small percentage of Darling and Stellenbosch. You know, like choosing these vineyards was always interesting, and you know, I've seen the best vineyard, but with a vineyard comes a farmer, and I always say to myself, you know, if the farmer doesn't speak your language from what you're trying to create, the way forward is never going to happen. And we're very fortunate that we've got a group of guys who and girls who are on our side, who, you know, they'll go the extra mile for us, which is fantastic. So this is really just kind of a Natte fillet, trying to get Cinsault into the broader market, and you know, that we all enjoy it. You know, so I don't know if you want. Can I pour myself a glass?
I'm ready to go.
Oh, geez, you're ahead of me.
Sir, I'm anxious. One thing I really appreciate about Cinsault is, again, for all those people who really enjoy Pinot and Grenache and Gamay, those high-tone fruits expressions, the the floral tones that come through that kind of float on top, and then the sense of minerality that goes through the mid palate. It's a very well defined wine, and it's very apparent to see its identity in the glass and on the palate.
Well, for me, what I really appreciate about Cinsault is its energy it has. You know, it's
very bright acidity, very food friendly, and it clocks in at 13% alcohol. So it's it does remind me of kind of a southern Burgundy feeling across the mid palate. It has that same kind of energy and tension. Very, very food friendly. So which of the different go ahead.
No. Well, you mentioned food friendly, and I think that's one thing that, you know, you yourself as a sommelier, what I've noticed about Cinsault is that it is it's a friend of everyone. You know, it really pairs with everything that comes its way. You know, it's very forgiving because it doesn't dominate. It's very bright, a lot of energy. The fruits are like upfront, and the great thing for me is I mean, we don't have a lot of bottlings going back because we only really started making this. You know, our first single bottling was in 2012, but the other day we opened 2013, which is my eldest son's birth year, and it's still very primary, which to me that really excites me. You know, I can't wait to taste these wines in sort of 20 years. Anthony, you and I can have another chat in 20 years' time and taste some older vintages, and I think it'll be super, super exciting to see what these wines develop into, because, you know, yes, they are incredibly approachable now and are delivering, you know, great. I mean, just you talk about a drinkable wine, you know, something which is also asking questions and intrigue and whatnot. I mean, to me, that's what makes it so, you know, it's before, after, it's an everyday wine, you know, it's the people's wine.
For sure. Yeah. The one thing that I enjoy about what your different bottlings have done is you can actually, if you line up all the different bottlings of Cinsault that you produce, you can clearly see that there is slight color differentiation. There is slight different phenolics in the glass. There's slightly different alcohol levels because they take on their terroir. So with that, the freshness and vibrancy, of what you're doing with these wines really reminds me of like Beaujolais wines 10, 15 years ago, where they were relatively inexpensive. Some, for the most part, still are, but there are some that have doubled or tripled in price. They are long-lived, and I think they get a bad rap of just being like, oh yeah, it's not a serious wine. These wines can age. They have this beautiful youth and vibrancy and energy about them now, but they clearly can age for a decade on. It reminds me of also what, you know, the kind of unspoken word of sommeliers used to say, you know, back going about 10 years ago. Nobody talk about Beaujolais because all the somms loved drinking it. And once they started pouring it and exposing other people to it, that only basically got the interest in Beaujolais increased over time. And now here we are today. It's interesting to watch the growth of Beaujolais and the thought process about it, how it's changed over the last 10, 15 years. And I clearly see that right now that's what's happening now to Cinsault in South Africa. Is people, you know, I still hear today that people think it's just a very simple, everyday, straightforward wine that's good for the beach, it's good for the picnic, but it can't last, it can't age all that well. Clearly it can, and I foresee it being more of an important factor moving forward. You know, granted, it's not necessarily a major grape producing grape in terms of production. It's still quite you know, towards the middle to the bottom of plantings overall. But I think people are now beginning to find that Sunso can make serious, amazing wine. You're talking to Eben Sadi, you know, he loves Sunso. If you look at
Yeah.
You know, Adi Bodenhurst, he's got a few bottlings of Sunso as well. It's like there's a lot of potential here, and you know, my job is to look inside all the glasses, find out what's hit, what's hip, what's popping, and report back. And more people need to seriously start checking out what South African Sunso is all about. It's super tasty.
But I mean, it's so true. What you're saying is how different in color all our single vineyard Sunsos look like, and that's, you know, that's what's so great for a small little cellar like ours is we have our first picking is normally our Paarl Sunso, and then it would be followed by our Swartland Sunso, and then right at the end we get Stellenbosch Sunso, and that's the lightest. We refer it to in the winery as the ballerina because it's so delicate. You know, you got to treat this so differently to how you're treating a Swartland, which is a Swartland to me, or actually the Paarl it's to me it's a bit like a rugby player or a football player compared to the Stellenbosch, which is this very delicate wine. For example, with the Stellenbosch, we don't introduce any stalks because for me that will just kill the wine. Yeah. You know, you want to keep that incredible delicacy and purity, whereas the Swartland has a lot more heat, dryness, and with that comes tannin and mature tannin, and you actually want a bit of stalk to create that sort of balance. And at the end of the day, you know, we're all looking for length in a wine, and that's where I love playing around with stalks because that's, yeah, it really helps you. We've actually got a technique here which a few people use, I don't know, but so we destalk the grapes and we actually keep a percentage of the stalks back, and then we lay them on mats in the sun so the stalks desiccate. And we've learned that this has really brought in a very balanced tannin structure. And I mean, I'm all for using, I mean, we follow a very natural approach to our winemaking, and I don't want to go and buy a French wood or something so we try and use what the vineyard is giving us. And that's obviously from a winemaker's, we make the decision as to how much we introduce, and that is based a lot on the vintage and how we feel for the how the flavors we're getting, and after the first few batches of Cinsa that have come through, the picture starts to develop. Okay, this year we're going to have to bring in a bit more. And like the 2018, which was for us very affected by the drought that South Africa's been experiencing. And, you know, there we brought in a lot of stalk because we needed something. We needed structure in those wines. You know, they were very lean, mean, and we needed to bring a little bit of thing on the side coming in. And that's where stalks really helped hugely. And I think that's what's, you know, how one uses it, how you play around with it. And that's what I love working with Cinsa is, especially these 4 blocks, is they're also totally different. So it really keeps you on your toes and you quickly figure out how things are going and in which direction they're going during harvest time.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah, that's what you said about oak and listening to the terroir, listening to the stems, when to add them, when to kind of pull back on them. Literally reminds me of a conversation I just had with Christophe Baron of Cayuse, No Girls, Horsepower. Yeah. And he basically had the same exact philosophy and mentality. And you seem to be very dialed in into what's happening with the vineyard. So you end up capturing the absolute freshness of the purity of what Sunso truly is. And it clearly shows in the glass.
I mean, in winemaking, like in the beginning of when we're heading towards sort of, I mean, sometimes it's complicated, but we spend an awful lot of time in the vineyard, you know, to try and, so we don't pick on sugar, we pick on pH and acidity, and then we look at a sort of a physical how the vineyard's doing, physically, how's it doing, how's it looking, a visual sort of take on it. And
For sure.
on those three things, we sort of figure out, okay, it's good to go now, But for us, the key is pH and acid, and alcohol for us is, that's an afterthought. We just want to get good resources into the winery and work from that. And once they're there, you generally, no chef uses bad ingredients, so you want to pick them when they're right. Yeah.
For sure. And to piggyback on what you just said, one of the greatest chefs that we've ever worked with said the secret of what an amuse-bouche is all about is being able to take the ingredients that are still very good that you might have not used in a certain dish and pull them aside to create something else that's equally as good that you otherwise might have not used, but you create something truly magical with that. And it wasn't until I saw the chef do exactly what he did, and I was like, well, why would you're going to save those scraps? And then he said, here, try this, about 2 hours later, and I tried it and like, this is amazing. Is this like a new appetizer? She's like, those are the scraps that you thought were poor, that you thought would be going in the trash.
Yeah.
When it comes to the skill set of a great chef, they can make just about anything happen. It's just they have to have the insight, the talent, and the ingenuity to take something from here, which is bound for somewhere else, and turn it into something truly great. Let's switch gears real fast. Let's turn to talk about your brand, Natte. Where do you ultimately see it in, say, 20 years time?
Well, I mean, it's obviously the riff we're playing is Cinsault, and I mean, I suppose I've backed this horse, so I want it to run well, and I think there is opportunity there. I mean, the more the other, I mean, before our COVID phase that the world is going through at the moment, I was fortunate enough to lead a tasting of Cinsault, and it was basically the people I was leading it for had bought a bunch of Cinsauts in. And for me, what was so incredible was, there were about 25 Cinsauts on the table. And not long ago, in 2012, I was one of 6 people making Cinsault. Yeah. And my approach was from a winemaking philosophy point of view, whereas now it's evolved into a wine marketing philosophy, which is, for me, that's how bad it is, also how exciting that is for the brand Cinsault. And I think, the more people that talk about it, and at the end of the day, it's an incredibly drinkable wine and a delicious wine. And yes, we as winemakers are still learning how to really nail it and how we're going to sort of make that iconic Cinsault. And I think we're still working on it. And I think there are a lot of critics who are saying, oh, you'll never get there, But I'm saying, whoa, let's hold your horses. We've only been doing this for, we've only been giving the time to Cinsault. I mean, yes, Cinsault's been in the ground a long time in South Africa, but no winemakers actually made a massive effort in it. And I think it's now the time that we're going to see some very exciting Cinsauts coming out, which are suddenly may say, well, hang on, they're changing this is becoming, something incredible. And yes, you're speaking to the converted at the moment, but, in 20 years' time, I'm hoping that, as we speak of Pinotage and Kononkop, you maybe speak of Natte and Cinsault. And, Kononkop is only, 2 miles away from me where I'm sitting at the moment. So, big words, but maybe one day we'll see, I hope. We can only dream.
For sure. And that's how things start, is they're first a thought and then put into action and then a plan and then hard work. And here we are.
Yeah.
So you've got children. Do you hope that your boys will take over your brand one day? Or is there a little bit of pressure from dad to be like, hey,
I don't know. Look, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've got 2 children. I've also got 4 nephews and a niece. So I guess, you know, amongst all of them, I hope someone will find just a slither of my passion for Cinso.
Cool.
So basically, we all live on the farm. So it's a big family on the farm, and you know, everyone mucks in when they can, and you know, they all know about what's going down, and so yeah, I hope that one day, you know, yes, obviously the amount of graft I've put into this project, I'd love to see someone carry on with it, and I'm sure there are enough willing hands at some stage to take it on.
Awesome. So Natte valleij is not all about Cinso. You've got some other bottlings and some other varietals that you work with.
Yeah.
Are there any other varietals that you're not currently working with that you'd like to work with sometime over your career?
It's I mean, I think that this is a conversation that I recently started making my first white wine, which is I really enjoy, and it's a style that I quite enjoy, and I think the more I come into the wine world, I rather enjoy low alcohol wines. And how do you achieve good low alcohol wines from a certain cultivar? You can't achieve them from every cultivar. So it's trying to pick your battle as to, and Cinso can do it. And I think there's one cultivar that I worked with this year. I only made 1 barrel of it, and that was Pinotage. So you know,
Okay.
it works well with you know, with a low alcohol. I think it's something that a lighter style Pinotage is something that it can really work, and I'm quite excited about that. Next year we're going to be making a bit more. Certainly not too much as the Cinso, but it's just something on the side. And at the end of the day, what's great about having your own winery is your hands aren't forced to always work with the same grapes. You know, if I see something interesting, I take it. You know, last year we worked with a bit of young Grenache, which was maybe a bit too young, maybe a bit overcropped, but it was still a learning curve and something that keeps you as winemaker on your toes. And I think that's, at the end of the day, the secret. You know, you've got to, you know, to sit in one place, make wine for your whole life is tough going. And, you know, not to get into the sort of the ins and outs of winemaking, but I love to play around, and that's what keeps you pushing the boundaries and seeing new things, new techniques, and I am very fortunate to see other farmers and what they have and what they're planting and what other winemakers are making from their grapes and their farm, and it all sort of builds a very interesting picture. So, to be honest, what I'm planning on, the cards are all very open, but what I'm definitely doing next year is I'm making a low alcohol Pinotage, or not. Sorry, I shouldn't say low alcohol because it's not like modified or anything. We're just making a very natural. Yes. We're just making a natural Pinotage with a fresh acidity and a beautiful drinkability.
So somewhere in like the range of, say,
12.5.
Yeah, say 12.5, 13. So something comparable.
Yeah, 12.5. That's
from recycling style to was it Rot's Liberté Pinotage, where it's
something like that.
style, fresher, floral lifted, bright acidity, not necessarily over oaked, but it speaks more to the parentage of Pinot Noir than that's one thing that I saw particularly interesting about Pinotage this last trip was from the top bottlings of Pinotage, I saw really great wine of Pinotage made from Pinotage grapes in the big, bold, extracted, good use of oak, very prime and polished,
Yeah.
something that the Napa Cabernet drinker would really enjoy. And then the absolute other side of the spectrum of the pendulum, as it swung the other way, lighter in style, mineral driven, with good acidity, food friendly, lower alcohol, and across the very center of those two styles, I saw, a lot of lackluster pinotage, where I think it's time for South Africa to really take a hard look at pinotage as a whole. I think it was Brewer Rotz that said, when you have a mom and a dad, Cinsault is a wine that makes a lighter colored wine. Pinot Noir is a lighter colored wine. When you have, both parents that are kind of smaller in stature, and you end up with a very large child, you gotta ask yourself, who are the real parents, and what's really going on here.
That's true.
I think there's a lot of, there's absolutely nothing wrong with pinotages that are big, bold, extracted, and oaked, because those are generous, hedonistic wines that give pleasure. But I think ultimately, I think the way forward for the identity of pinotage will be to focus on possibly a lighter style that is more food friendly.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's the food friendliness that really excites me, and that's what these lower alcohol, less wood. It just, it's more pleasing. It's more versatile. It's. I mean, you as a sommelier know yourself. And that's what really excites me about. At the end of the day, we are making a culture. Our wines need to be paired with food. And on the southern tip of Africa, we need to export our wines. So the wines need to be able to work with an American culture. It needs to work with a European culture. It needs to work with a Chinese culture or Asian culture, whatever the culture may be. And how more you can create that sort of palette or wine, I think the more success you will have. And the problem with it is, yes, these overwooded wines are delicious, and I myself, will enjoy it. But I mean, obviously, I've got to be careful what I say now. But those wines don't necessarily work on everything. They're pretty strong and powerful, which is great. But
they're like a tool. You have a tool for everything.
Exactly.
You have a hammer for nails. You've got a screwdriver for screws. You've got a wrench for nuts and bolts. They all have their own profile, and kind of the paradoxical kind of viewpoint of pinotage that I ultimately have is, I still consider Kranenkoop to still be the king of pinotage in South Africa. Those wines are absolutely beautiful. They're meant for certain occasions and certain food pairings, but at the same time, I think Brewer Rotz Liberté pinotage is just as beautiful, but it's a completely different spectrum. It's like looking at a sprinter and looking at a long distance runner. Both are top athletes. One is meant for now, quick, boom, like massive explosion off the line, and one is meant for longevity and can go the distance. It's the same side of the coin, but opposite sides of the coin. It's kind of a oxymoron.
No, absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk about food and wine pairings, since we're talking about being a food friendly wine. Do you have any food and wine pairings that you really enjoy that go great with your Cinsault?
I've got a few, and my wife makes a delicious a chicken pie, and I know it's very simple food, but we're simple out here in the southern tip of Africa, but it works perfectly. And then my mother's coq au vin is like the best with Cinsault. And we have a fromagerie just down the road from us called Dalewood, and I tell you, a little platter of theirs and a Cinso is actually one of the best. That combination is superb. But my all-time favorite and is a good South African braai.
Yeah.
With a Cinso in front of the
Barbecue.
coals. Nothing beats that.
Nice.
Nothing beats that at all.
I was thinking about food and wine applications for Cinso, for South African Cinso as a whole, and it kind of, for me, it kind of fits the peg of anything that Pinot Noir can do. I think Cinso can do. So I actually tried it with duck, and it was really
that's
with duck.
delicious. Yeah, delicious. Well, I mean, we have a saying on the farm is that Cinso is the poor man's Pinot Noir. And
there you go.
Yeah. I mean, Professor Perold, who bred Pinotage all those years back, I mean, he obviously saw the similarities between Cinso and Pinot Noir. The one was the workhorse, and the other one was the grand, the aristocrat. And if you put the two together, you'll get the middle class. That sort of thing. But I mean, I always tell people, for me, Pinot Noir is like the girl that lives on the big house on the top of the hill, and you get to see her a little bit, but
there's no way in. You can't get past the gate.
There's no way in. The's like, forget about it, mate. Forget about it. Yeah. Whereas Cinso is the girl in the village who is the most fun and the best girl ever. Yeah. And that's kind of
was that your wife laughing?
Yeah.
Was that your wife laughing in the background? Was that your wife laughing?
Yeah, she's laughing in the background. Yeah. She's a Cinso girl.
She's a Cinso. Love it. That's funny.
Sorry, very rude.
No, I love that analogy. It's pretty rad. Yeah, Cinso is like the chick in the bar that can drink 5 beers with you and be fine and be like, hey, let's go get something to eat. You're like, I'm gonna marry you.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like it's like and she can pass a rugby ball at you harder than your brother can.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did that. Yeah. What was it? Eben Sadi said one of the reasons why he loves Cinso is because it's like a little puppy. When it runs at you, it's all cute, but then it can go rah, and kind of jump at
you. Exactly. Oh yeah. So you got to watch those sharp puppy teeth, because that's one thing I learned very early is that you've really got to be on top of Cinso in the cellar. There's no like going on holiday for a week just after harvest. You got to be on it because but once it's settled, it's fine, but it's just to try and make sure that everything is okay.
Yeah, I did something a little different today. What I did is actually this has been in my cellar, so it's at proper cellar temperature. I actually ended up putting it in the fridge for 30 minutes ahead of time, and then pulled it out. And then as we were talking, let it kind of cool up. So it was chillier than it should have been. Poured a glass, and as we're talking, I've been going back, smelling it and tasting it. And there's something really spectacular that happens as it warms up. And I think that's one thing that Americans, I think, tend to do wrong is we drink our red wines too warm and our white wines too cold. Where I always implore the rule of 20 minutes. If you have a white wine, it's probably been in the fridge for a day or two. Pull it out of the fridge, wait 20 minutes, then pop the cork. That will bring up the temperature just enough to enjoy the white wine. When it's too cold, it's shut down and it's not as rewarding. Red wines typically are drank too warm in the States, so I recommend putting the red wine in the fridge for 20 minutes, waiting 20 minutes, pulling it out, then opening up and then pouring it. It chills the wine down just a touch, and as the wine comes up to temperature, it becomes more aromatic, more giving, and it shows more of its identity, and it's a very pleasing thing. And this is the first time. I think
that's great advice.
This is this is the first time that actually I gave it a full 30 minutes in the fridge, and as it was coming up, I'm looking at the glass. It's not frosting over. It's not ice cold. but it's just I think a perfect temperature, and it's a very beautiful, delicate, floral wine.
But
You know,
it's interesting on drinking temperatures. You need to remember that in South Africa we come from quite a hot climate here.
yeah,
And when I did my first harvest in France in 2005, the guy I worked with, he was an intern as well, and we drove up to his parents in Paris, and it was now in November time, and they used to keep all their wines outside on the veranda,
yeah,
or to keep chilled, from beers to everything. I
yeah.
know from an African guy, that was just crazy, like
Insane.
here
Yeah,
we just don't get cold enough. And that's where you start learning. And then the reds, I mean, yeah, the debates of temperature and what you drink, it can go on for all day. Like I don't get particularly cross with people in South Africa who put a block of ice in a glass of white wine. Just don't do it to me. But if you're gonna do it, it's cool. I got no problem with it.
yeah. I mean, my whole philosophy is if that's what you want to enjoy, do it. Have at it. Awesome. Enjoy your wine with ice for sure. For me, it's almost sacrilegious.
I know where you're coming from. If you know the sweat and tears that go into it, you ain't.
Yeah,
putting
it's like,
no
why would you?
ice in it.
It's like, yeah, it's like you're making a steak or something. Why would you put water on a steak? It's like you're watering it down. You're bending the integrity of the experience, and ultimately kind of diminishing the sincerity of the expression as well. I kind of made mention to this before about, I've heard a lot of people say, Cinsault, that it's not a serious wine and this can't age. It's more of just a picnic wine, might be good for the beach. What would you say to those people?
Well, it is a picnic wine because you can drink it at a picnic, and you can take it to the fancy Michelin star restaurant and drink it there. This is what's so fantastic about Cinsault. It's so versatile. It gives me goosebumps just talking about it. We can have it at a picnic. I mean, we often have it at picnics, but we can also have it at some great top end restaurants, and that's what's so fantastic about it. And yes, you'll always get those people who want more tannic. They want an attack on the palate, and which is great. Good for you. But there are a lot of people that also want delicate flavors and want to be able to taste the food and whatever they're eating. And if it is a pork pie at their picnic and they want to pair it with a Cinsault, I promise you it's going to work absolutely brilliantly. But if you at a top restaurant where you're tasting little flavors here and little strong flavors here, Cinsault is also ideal. So yeah, I'm not going to get into a battle for telling people. I'm just telling you, Cinsault, it's good for everything. I'm not trying to but it really is. Go out and buy yourself a bottle, and just see for yourself. It really is. It's so versatile, and I think that's what really excites me, and I think that's why it's become so popular so quickly, is because it is so food friendly.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, in some of my tasting notes, I say wow, I'm adding I'm adding this wine to my cellar, and it doesn't happen often, but when it does, I'm truthful. And I reached out to the American importer and purchased, I think it was 4 or 6 bottles. I think it was 4 bottles, 4-pack, and added them to my cellar. And this is actually one of the bottles from my cellar, and had purchased some of the other single area wines. I think I got the Darling, the Swartland, the Stellenbosch.
And there's a Siemensburg Paul.
The Siemensburg Pearl. I didn't get the Siemensburg Pearl. It wasn't available where it was, but I got those 3, and I actually brought them home with me in my suitcase, just to see how they would fare as far as traveling and bring back home and experiment with. And show friends and family hey, check this out. This is what's happening over there.
Yeah.
Overall, where do you see South African Cinsault going, and do you think it's going to be more prevalent in the years to come?
Well, I mean, I think you'd be naive to say that it's not going anywhere if you've seen the growth that category has shown in the last sort of, you know, 3 4 years. You know how many more sensor producers we have. So I think you're naive to say, it's going to fuzz out. I mean, I remember 3 years ago being at a tasting and a sort of a winemaker saying, "Oh, sensor, it's just a fad." And I was thinking, oh, I bloody hope it's not a fad, because, you know, my eggs are in this basket pretty strongly, and I'm pretty confident about it. And I think, yes, it will obviously reach a crest and will drop. But Sensor is here to stay. That's a fact. You know, there's no changing that, you know. And I think, yes, it will become, I don't think as big as Chenin Blanc is for South Africa, but I think it will be very much, you know, the red cultivar is not quite there yet for South Africa. What we can do, that race is still very much open. If Cinso can win that race, I don't know. You know, it's early days. You know, we only really making great Cinsos in the last sort of 8 years. You know, since Eben started the Pofadder. You know.
Yeah.
You know, it's still very early days, and if we still haven't reached a leader amongst the other guys, I'm come from a cycling background, and for me, we reaching that finish line in a bunch sprint, and you know, it's anyone's race, and whoever comes out, give it another 10 years, I'd be interesting to see what happens. Yes, I guess it's a bit like, you know, talking on an American system. You know, you've got, you know, in 1986, Greg LeMond won the Tour de France, the first American, you know, young kid in a French team. He was English speaking. I mean, it was unheard of. He had a massive disadvantage, the mere fact that he was an American, you know, and didn't, well, he spoke French by then, but he was in a French team. His team leader was Bernard Hinault, who was the French hero.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, for me, that's a bit like Cinso. It's coming from a big back at the bunch, you know, and to get to the front, it's going to take a huge effort. But it's definitely here to stay. It's, you know, we've got too much old plantings here to ignore it. And
Sure.
I mean, that's what I often tell people. To get old vineyards means that they made good wine. And even more so, it was good wine coming from a grape which no one really respected, but they're still in the ground, which for me is phenomenal. It means that even though the winemaker wasn't going to say Cinso on his bottle, he still wanted that wine in his cellar, because he knew blending it in was going to make a difference to whatever he was going to burn. And that's exciting. You know, that to me, you know, you can give me opinions, but that's fact, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a sucker for a great underdog story, and although I don't think Cinso will ever overtake Cabernet in South Africa, I think one day could potentially give Pinotage a run for its money. Cool. I know it's getting late there. It's close to 11 o'clock your time. I won't keep you for much longer.
No.
Do you have any final thoughts or parting words, or you know, additional you know, Cinso ramblings for us to part with?
Well, I think first of all, whoever's watching this, I need to thank everyone for supporting the South African wine industry at the moment in the international market. And, you know, it actually humbles one to see the support that's going down. For those who don't know, we're in an alcohol ban, and it's not such a cool place to be in when this is happening. Crazy things happen, but there's such a support in the international market, and I think we can all just say thank you. You know, it's awesome. And more so than that, yes, Cinso, I love it, and I think everyone needs to get out. Our import in America is Canopy Wines. They are fairly well represented all across America. And, you know, go out there. I mean, it doesn't have to be another place Cinsaut. It can be any Cinsaut. Just buy a bottle of Cinsaut if you see it. America makes good Cinsaut as well, you know. There's some very old vineyards in Lodi which are incredible. I've been fortunate enough to taste a few, and just explore, you know, change your dynamic of what you normally taste, you know, and I hope Cinsaut, you know, it might seem too light for you. You might expecting something different, but it's not that light. If you like Pinot Noir, you'll love Cinsaut. If you don't like Pinot Noir, you will love Cinsaut. You know, that's if that makes any sense.
No.
Yeah, but well, you know, it's late here, so you know, just bear with me here. Yeah. So on that regard, I mean, yeah, give it a damn good try. You know, we need a. I think it's a damn good wine. You know, I think, you know, I always tell people, Cinsaut was the most planted grape in South Africa.
Yeah.
You know, back in the 80s, 70s. This was a time before. Sorry?
From the 1870s up until, I think, the 1920s.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was massively planted. Now, I've learned in my young years that old people were clever. You know, they did things for a reason. Yeah. You know, back in those 50 years back, you know, you didn't have the convenience of a cell phone to quickly phone a viticulturist who was going to help you out of some issue that you developed in your vineyard. You needed a vineyard that could work in your soil. And old people, old cultivars, they were good. They worked. They knew what worked in the land. And I think that is a very good thing about Cinsaut, is there's good reason that there was lots of it planted, because it worked. And how you want to see that, you know, yes, I'm being prophetic and blah, but I truly mean it, is that we need to look at cultivars that don't need to drain our land. And I think Cinsaut is one of those things that it has an ability to sustain drought. I've seen that. We've just come off, I was saying to Anthony a few days ago, we had a little quick chat before this chat, saying that we've had 4 years of drought. We still, hopefully, we're getting some rain on Sunday. We had a relatively good beginning of July, but we really need a bit more rain. And we're coming off the bat of this pretty dry time, and I think we've made some pretty good Cinsauts. You know, I wish we'd made Cinsauts of more of the 2015 vintage, because I think then we'd be saying, actually, this is a serious wine. You know, we're not messing about now. But we've dealt with drought. We've dealt with a vineyard we don't quite understand, because no one's really given it the time to make great wines from, and we've ignored it a bit from a viticultural point of view. Mm-hmm. But I think now, post-drought, and I'm hoping that in the next few years, things look better, I'm super amped. Because if it can do this in a drought year, you know, let alone what it can do in other years, you know. So I'm massively positive about it.
Awesome. Well, you've heard it first from the man himself. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I know it's getting late. Really great to see you. I hope you're doing well. Hope your family is safe during this pandemic. And my heart goes out to South Africa with the government imposed prohibition that's going on now. So hang in there. Keep making this fantastic juice. Super solid. I've actually drank the rest of what's in my glass, so I can't even drink anymore. I have to pour into the glass.
What are the rest of the bottle?
Right. Just that for dinner tonight. Keep it here, locked here for next week as I switch over to Washington State for a really new, exciting winery, Cardis Winery. We'll have husband-wife team, the Liebeckers, joining me. So until then, stay safe, drink well, and be kind to others.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Cheers, everyone.